Howdy, I'm John Dykes. Wanted to show you how we go about fertilizing our corn in our waffle garden. First, we're going to tell you a fairly common way of putting nitrogen in when the plants are young. But I also want to show you a trick that an old pot farmer told me about that will help your plants when they really have got to go to fruiting and you really want to stimulate fruiting and get them really rootin', tootin', and raring to go. Come on, let's check it out. One of the first things to think about is the fact that most plants go through two major growth cycles in their life. They go through a youth stage where they build up their root in their body system. They try to pull on lots and lots and lots of mass so that they reach their full genetic potential, and then they can burst out and push all of that stored up energy into the seeds that come up next. So you have to concentrate on giving them nitrogen when they're young. The nitrogen helps them grow to their full genetic potential, although you don't want to overdo the nitrogen, because if you do, you're going to get sickly plants that are susceptible to disease and pests. You can use a lot of different nitrogen sources that are commonly available, such as blood meal, fish meal. We're using feathermeal here. I also make a type of fish taffy, so you can do it for 20 cents a gallon, and it is very effective and very good. I'll be making a video about that, so make sure you hit the subscribe and notification button so you'll be notified of those type of videos I'll come up with. There's also different legumes that you can grow as cover crops. They will put the bacteria into the soil and help them grow, and this bacteria called rhizobacteria can actually take the atmospheric nitrogen out of the air that's in the soil, and they can move it to the plants and help the plants grow and store it in the soil for the next generation. So these are all different things you can do. In this case, I'm putting the feathermeal on the corn. I'll usually do this 2 or 3 times before it starts to get to the tasseling stage, which is when they're getting mature and need to be switched away from nitrogen to phosphorus and potassium. Now, of course, after you put any nitrogen source down, you've got to give a lot of water. Nitrogen bonds very quickly with water. You want to carry the nitrogen into the soil so it can get to the plant roots and not volatilize into the atmosphere and be wasted. In this case, we've got a pretty heavy wood mulch, which is my preferred mulch method. And the mulch will tie up a little bit of nitrogen as it decomposes, but that's all fine. Eventually everything rots into the soil and really makes for a very humus rich, well draining, soft, loamy soil. Here we are irrigating the young corn. Now when corn's young, I like to put water on the leaves and keep them free of dust, insects, things like that. But once they start to tassel, you do not want to be washing the pollen off. Observe how the water goes down into your soil and try to use that as your key to understanding what kind of water frequency you need to do. Now here's the beginning of the fruiting stage for the corn. The tassels are just starting to be coming out. The silks will be coming out on the ears before too long. I'll be making a video on pollinating your corn by hand, because if you're a small family, you don't need to have a field of corn. But if you do not have a field of corn, you can get incomplete pollination. There's a trick to this. There will be a video coming, so make sure you hit the notifications button. So anyways, there are bacteria that can pull the phosphorus and potassium out of the soil, just like there are other bacteria that can pull the nitrogen out of the air. This is the phosphorus potassium. This is the old pot grower's trick. He mixes this stuff with water and then puts in a little bit of molasses that is a food source for these bacteria. The bacteria will go crazy and crazy in this warm water, eating up all of that sugar. Now you've got two elements of your biological soil engine here. You've got the moisture and you got the biology. But to really get stimulated, you have to introduce air. So what you do is put an air stone in, or you use a 5-gallon bucket and stir it like this. And when you're putting that air in, you are now revving up that biological engine. You can then take your 5-gallon bucket and just flood irrigate your tasseling corn with it. I don't want to be putting any water on top of my tasseling corn because that can lead to a little bit of rot problems. It can also wash pollen away, and you want all the pollen that your plants can get, and you want it to go to the right places, so that'll be in the video. Now this is a type of biology that actually in nature lives on the roots of the plants. It cannot produce sugars, but it needs sugars. And what it does is it gives phosphorus to the plant when the plant needs phosphorus, and the plant will then give a little globule of sugar to the biological organism. This bacteria will live right by there and just sit there waiting for sugar. And when the plant needs phosphorus, it will tap onto this bacteria and say, hey buddy, here's a drop of sugar, give me some P. That's what the P is for, and the NPK. You've got those 3 digits on the front of your fertilizer container. They'll say 10, 10, 10, something like that. The first one is nitrogen, the second one is phosphorus, the third one is potassium, NPK. And that's why that MammothP is called MammothP. It's releasing huge amounts of phosphorus. When you use this, you really do notice a difference in a day and a half or so in flower formation. These squashes are going to go crazy with this stuff. The corn is going to just love it. So this is one of those little tricks that's really worth knowing. But the thing to know about this is people talk about the minerals in the soil is going away in the world, but that's not the case. The dirt is mineral element. It's from the base constituency of geological formations broken down through billions of years. What's not available is the availability of some of these elements because they're tied up in the soil in such a way. But see, the thing is, the plants evolved with these things so long ago, and that's how they are able to live in the wild the way they are without some gardener coming along and putting feathermeal on them. The difference is here we're going for production. We're humans. We've made a manufactured plant that's been modified by humans for so many thousands of years that it can't live on its own. And we take these little bacterias in proportions of hundreds of thousands of times their natural population in the environment, and we flood irrigate and let that stuff be carried several inches into the soil, letting all those bacteria go crazy on all the phosphorus that's in this soil, releasing it in the form of what they call available phosphorus. People have been doing agriculture for about 10,000 years. They've learned an amazing amount of things about the biology of plants, the environment, the soil, etc. But the thing is, we really don't know a huge amount about the soil. So much of these things that are being found in the last 5 or 10 years are the sort of thing that was just base hypothesis or science fiction thought 30 or 40 years ago. There's a lot of learning in soil science still to come along. But what you need to do is think of yourself and your soil as a holistic entity. It all works together. It all needs one another to work and function properly. You've got this soil biological engine that you have to keep revved up. And maybe in between crops, you can let it idle down a little bit. But you ought to think of your soil as a giant petri dish that you have to maintain the proper environmental circumstances for the biological entities that are in it. This is what is going to power your plants and give you the optimum nutrition, such that it's almost like medicine. This food is so packed with nutrients, so packed with fertility and energy that it's amazing. Well, folks, thank you very much for listening in. I hope you click like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I want to tell you a lot more about a lot more things.